An Israeli airstrike on Beirut kills Hezbollah's top military commander, its highest level target during a ceasefire that came into force a year ago. There have been frequent Israeli breaches throughout, but why this strike now, and what are the implications? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the programme. I'm Imran Khan. An Israeli airstrike on Beirut has killed Hezbollah's top military commander and 4 other people, underlying the fragile nature of Lebanon's uneasy peace. It's the latest among many Israeli breaches of a ceasefire brokered a year ago under US direction. Israel says Hezbollah too has broken the truce. Along with the US, Israel is demanding the Lebanese government force the group to disarm. But that presents challenges for President Joseph Aoun, who strongly condemned Sunday's airstrike. He's facing pressure from all sides, the US, opposition from Hezbollah, and continued Israeli aggression. So why did Israel carry out this attack now? And what are the implications and dangers it poses? We'll speak to our guests shortly, but first this report by Katia Lopez-Hodian.
The aftermath of an Israeli attack in Lebanon's capital. The target, Hezbollah's top military commander, Haytham Tabatabai, is the highest-ranking member of the group to be killed since the ceasefire came into force a year ago. It's increased fears that more violence will follow.
This attack on Beirut's southern suburbs crosses a new red line, a line that was previously crossed.
The ceasefire hasn't stopped Israel from bombing Lebanon almost daily over the past year. Sunday's attack was the first on Beirut in months, but strikes in the south of the country have intensified in recent weeks. UN peacekeepers have recorded more than 10,000 Israeli air and ground violations since the end of November 2024, and Lebanon's health ministry says more than 300 people have been killed. Lebanon's government is under increased pressure to force Hezbollah to surrender its weapons, one of the conditions of the truce deal. The group has refused, insisting Israel must first withdraw its forces from southern Lebanon and stop its attacks, both also conditions of the agreement. The state's plan for Hezbollah to disarm by the end of the year is far from meeting its deadline.
Israel continues to insist on the full enforcement of the ceasefire agreement with Lebanon while taking steps to ensure our security. We will not allow Hezbollah, the terror organization, to recover.
The assassination comes amid tensions in neighboring Syria, where Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu recently visited troops along the buffer zone, a provocation, critics say, intended to stoke fear. Now a year into the ceasefire between Israel and Lebanon, there are questions about whether the fragile agreement will hold, or if the latest attack signals a new phase, part of a strategy of escalating Israeli aggression. Katia Lopez-Hodian, Al Jazeera for Inside Story.
Now let's bring in our guests. Joining us from Beirut is Joe Macaron, a geopolitical analyst specialising in US strategy in the Middle East. And Nadim Houry is the Executive Director of Arab Reform Initiative. He joins us from Paris. And in Tel Aviv is Alon, Pinkas, a former Israeli ambassador and Consul General of Israel in New York. A warm welcome to you all. I want to start with you, Nadim, in Paris. Just 2 days ago, Joseph Aoun said he was willing to reopen negotiations with Hezbollah. There was a confidence in the air that they could get to a deal by the end of the year. Then this attack has happened on Hezbollah. Hezbollah have always said that whilst there are these ceasefire infractions taking place, that they can't meet their demands, the demands to disarm. Do you have any sympathy with that position from Hezbollah?
Well, first of all, I think the position here is, since the ceasefire, as the report reminded, Israel has been violating it almost on a daily basis. There are 331 Lebanese who've been killed, almost 1,000 injured, and actually including almost over a dozen Lebanese who've been kidnapped by Israel since the ceasefire from Lebanese territory. Lebanon, according to all reports by observers, including the US, has actually been respecting the ceasefire terms, including Hezbollah has been respecting the ceasefire terms. There have been no rocket attacks on Israel, even though Israel keeps attacking Lebanon. So it really seems now that the Lebanese government and the president are saying, we want to negotiate with Israel, of course, with whoever mediator you feel comfortable with, the US, the UN, and the response from Israel is to continue attacking in violation. So I think the real question is Israel really interested in peace?
Well, that's a very, very good question. Alon, I'm going to put that question to you. Is Israel interested in peace?
Oh, it's a very... I can only agree with you that it's a very good question, because according to the signs, the answer is no, or at least not in the sense that we all mean collectively what peace means. Look, in terms of why Israel is doing this, there are two ways of looking at it. One is the military reaction. And that is that Israel said repeatedly that it would not tolerate Hezbollah rearming, regrouping, restoring its military power, even if it's gradual. And that's exactly what Hezbollah is doing. Parenthetically, it just shows you the unfounded and mendacious claims that Mr. Netanyahu has made, that he slammed and degraded and annihilated Hezbollah to the point of incapacitating it. The answer is he did not. Israel did not. And so Israel adopted in the last year a policy that it calls zero containment, meaning that it would not stand by idly as Hezbollah regroups. And that is based on the notion that even though the ceasefire agreement was signed a year ago, 27th of November to be exact, it was never feasible or enforceable that the Lebanese army would actually disarm Hezbollah. And that has to do with relations, political relations and political equations within Lebanon. But Nadim was right that Hezbollah and Lebanon as a state, and Hezbollah being a state within a state to a degree, they did not violate the ceasefire, which leads me to the second perspective here. And that is that Mr. Netanyahu, given that the focus is on Gaza, that the Americans set up a base in southern Israel, that they're flying drones over Gaza, that everyone is concentrating on Gaza. There was a UN Security Council resolution just last week concerning Gaza and the International Stabilization Force, et cetera, et cetera. But Mr. Netanyahu has a vested political interest in maintaining a war atmosphere. Since Iran is too big a risk and Gaza is too much under the international microscope, at least for now, Lebanon remains the most convenient arena for him to maintain this level of, we're in a war, it's a seven-front war, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm not surprised by these violations. By the way, Israel's...
Sorry, Alon, I'm just gonna stop you there. The reason for that distraction, let's be absolutely clear about this, is because Netanyahu has court cases that are going through. He's under a lot of pressure from the court to finish those court cases. He's facing perhaps jail time. All of this is for him to seal his political legacy. Now, I'm going to come to Joe in Beirut. Joe, just a follow-up on this. It was the US that really pushed this ceasefire through. Now, you're an analyst who specialises in US strategy in the Middle East. What was the current thinking now about this ceasefire? It keeps getting violated 1,200 times in the last year.
I mean, firstly, ceasefire was adopted by the past administration in concert with the current administration. And second, it wasn't like a ceasefire with a clear mechanism and a clear benchmark and a clear timeline. So this needs to be clarified. And it's not only about international law, it's about who can enforce the rules of engagement. This has always been the case across the Lebanese border. The Israeli now feel they are empowered, they are enabled by the US, And now I don't think the Gaza ceasefire was able to restrain them from the U.S. perspective, whether even in Gaza and even in Syria. So they had intelligence information about the Hezbollah leader, and they acted on it on the spot. And this is what's happening now. They are trying to preempting any movement. So the U.S. now, I don't think the Lebanon is a priority for them. That's first. And second, they're expecting the Lebanese government to do the job, regardless of what will happen with Iran and other aspects of Lebanese politics. And we're stuck in this now, in this vicious cycle where either the Lebanese have to disarm and potentially have domestic stability, or there'll be a war, or there's a path of negotiation that doesn't look like as promising, at least from this moment now. So I don't think the U.S. has a plan, neither for Gaza nor for Lebanon, and I don't think Lebanese also is helping themselves in the process. And I think the Israeli perspective is clear. We have an out-of-control prime minister who is not restrained by domestic politics nor by any.
Joe, I'm going to stop you there because you've made several points that I want to bring to Nadim. The US doesn't really have a plan, according to Joe. Also, Lebanon is looking to try and disarm Hezbollah, particularly the Lebanese army. If Hezbollah wanted to disarm, they would disarm. They don't need the Lebanese army to be able to do that. It's all as much a political thing. So is there a failure of politics in Lebanon here, or is this just Israeli pressure?
Well, look, we all know that the Lebanese army is not going to disarm Hezbollah in a direct military confrontation. I mean, even the US recognizes that. And I think even the Israeli leadership knows this. The current government in Lebanon and the current president have gone as far as they can. Now, some Lebanese want them to go further, but short of military confrontation with Hezbollah, they've taken a clear decision. And what they've said to the international community and indirectly to Israel is, give us some cards, give us some arguments that we can use to convince not Hezbollah directly, but those who support Hezbollah and those who fear, basically the Shia in the south, that coming back into sort of under the protection of the state has benefits. Unfortunately, Israel has denied them any card. They can't even start the reconstruction process. So yes, the Lebanese politics are broken on this point, in large part, in my view, because Israel is not giving any space for a natural political process to evolve in the country. And secondly, the US, including France, but the US is not being an honest broker, particularly given their responsibility in ensuring that the ceasefire agreement should be respected. So my view is actually overall in Lebanon, there's a clear sense of, yes, the Lebanese army has to be the only actor in the country with arms. But it's going to take years for us to get there fully. But interestingly, what the army, the Lebanese army has been able to do in the last few months in terms of deployment to south of the Litani has actually exceeded expectations of most international observers, including American and French ones, and notably American ones are not known to be biased for the Lebanese on that. So I think we need time. The Lebanese need time that Netanyahu and his government and the Israeli army are not giving the Lebanese to do this. And meanwhile, mediators are not playing their role. So yes, they're trying to, I don't know what Israel really wants. Does Israel really think that the Lebanese army is going to enter into another war with Hezbollah while Israel continues to occupy Lebanese land, while Israel continues to actually kidnap Lebanese citizens?
Alon,
no Lebanese army and no Lebanese army chief could do that.
It's a very interesting point there. What does Israel want? Israel knew from the very beginning that putting the Lebanese army front and center of this deal was going to be difficult, to say the least. Nadim's just put it much better than I just did. So was this a deal, a ceasefire, designed to fail?
I don't know if it was designed to fail, but it was almost assured to fail. And look, Joe said that Lebanon is not a U.S. priority, and Nadim said that the mediators are not doing their job. And all I can do is agree 100% with both Joe and Nadim. And that goes back to the point I made to you, Imran, that this became the most tragically, this became the most convenient arena for Mr. Netanyahu to continue war, and he thinks, and I think he's wrong, but nonetheless he thinks he controls the escalation. By controlling the escalation, meaning that he decides, when to intensify military activity, assuming he can then bring it down back in scale. That's usually a miscalculation in these kind of occurrences, because killing Mr. Tabatabai from Hezbollah and his predecessors throughout 2024, led Mr. Netanyahu to boast and brag. But these people were all replaceable. And even though Iran does not provide as much as it did to Hezbollah, and even though Syria as a conduit has been scaled down because of the events in Syria, Hezbollah is still a formidable organization militarily. And anyone who thought, and I'm repeating what the two colleagues said before, anyone who thought for a second that the Lebanese army is both capable, willing, and equipped to disarm Hezbollah either doesn't understand politics, or, like you said, Imran, set this or designed this to fail from the outset.
Let me bring in Joe here. Joe, one of the things that's really interesting to me about the ceasefire deal is it was rushed into place. It really hasn't been, it's almost been forgotten by the US. Is the US playing a very blind game here? Because we've got the ceasefire, that's all sorted. We're going to concentrate on something else, Ukraine, whatever. We know that Donald Trump is a very mercurial creature and gets distracted very easily. And that's the opportunity for Israel to do what it's doing, because it knows that the US is simply not interested. Tom Barak, the special envoy to Lebanon, hasn't been empowered that much. What do you make of that statement?
The way to implement the ceasefire is through the mechanism that's meeting regularly. The problem is, if there's no political will or political framework, this mechanism has not been functional. They meet and they trade report, but it's not going there. And here, we have to make this point. Nobody is saying that Lebanese army should disarm Hezbollah by force. But there's a security gap that's been historic in Lebanon, and now it's still empty. The Lebanese army is not fully in control of South of Litani. And this is part of the problem, that there's no full control. There's no clear attempt to verify what's happening. And Lebanon is the weaker side here. So we can talk about international law or what might be just or not. But what's happening now is we have a unprecedented Israeli air power that basically enforcing some rule of engagement that didn't exist before 2024. We are expecting, as the Lebanese government, I'm talking, that the French and the American pressure the Israelis. And the Americans, most notably, they are refusing to do so before they see a clear disarmament of Hezbollah in a plan that was adopted by the Lebanese government. Lebanon is not proactive diplomacy, it's not proactive military on the ground. And the Israeli are basically benefiting from this because the mechanism has been dysfunctional moving forward. So I think it's the pressure is on Lebanese to try to protect the interests of the Lebanese, the security of the Lebanese moving forward, not in confrontation with Hezbollah, but they have to have an independent approach to the current situation.
Now, Nadim, there is a implementation in place. There is an agreement in place. It's 1701. It's the UN resolution that put UN peacekeepers into the south of Lebanon. That has been in place for a very long time. Two questions here, both connected to each other. Has 1701 failed, and is it time for the Lebanese to try and negotiate 1702 effectively, a new agreement?
Look, I mean, the irony in the situation here is that for the first time in a long, long time, there is I disagree with Joe here on something, which I think the Lebanese political establishment has made a huge step forward in the last few months, granted, because of Israel's military superiority and the weakening of Hezbollah. But regardless of how we got there, we did get there. And the Lebanese are saying, we want to enforce this, we want to implement this. Who's putting pressure? I mean, who refused to renew UNIFIL with the exception of just one additional year? The U.S., basically. So there's a sense, I think in the past, because of Syrian control, because of Lebanese division, because of Lebanese incompetence, the corruption of our political elites, all of the above, Lebanon had not been serious about protecting its country. Now you have a historical moment where you actually have leadership saying, we want to do it. And the problem is Israel and Netanyahu keep moving the goalpost. And the U.S., instead of supporting the Lebanese in a process, and actually, yeah, sure, have a roadmap, say this has to happen by then, they're not giving any carrots. It's only sticks. And sticks alone are not going to be sufficient. In my view, 1701 is good enough. We know what is needed to negotiate. We saw Lebanon and Israel, they were able to negotiate the maritime border. They can do it as well for the land border. But there's one thing that none of us can deny, is Israel is today occupying 5 points, not points, strategic points inside Lebanon. In the ceasefire agreement, that was clear. Israel was supposed to withdraw from these points. And also,
actually,
just
Nadim,
to say,
that brings me very nicely.
If there's a violation, they're supposed to give it to the monitoring committee.
That actually brings me very nicely to my next question, which is about what Israel does next. Now, Israel keeps pushing Hezbollah. So far, Hezbollah hasn't really responded in that fashion that we perhaps would have expected 12 months ago, where we were expecting rockets on Tel Aviv. Israel has, but is Israel still pressing Hezbollah? Where's the end game for this, Alon? Is it going to be tanks like 1982 in Israeli tanks in Beirut? Is there going to be a full-scale invasion? Because if they keep pushing this and Hezbollah eventually cracks and fights back, that's escalation, right?
Well, I certainly hope not, because not one of Israel's invasions into Lebanon produced any tangible benefits for anyone other than death, misery, bloodshed, and tragedy. It produced nothing, and it was a quagmire, and it was compared to Vietnam, and then later to Afghanistan, and then back to Lebanon, and making the same mistake again is a sign of stupidity and hubris, not of political planning. Which brings me to your question, Imran. What's the end game? There is no end game. That's what many critics have been saying about the war in Gaza. That's what many critics, including myself, have been saying about the war in Lebanon, that there is no end game. Look, the regime in Iran, in Syria changed. Iran was battered militarily, although obviously not as much or to the extent that Mr. Netanyahu and Mr. Trump boast that it has. But nonetheless, it lost a lot of its geopolitical levers and clout, at least temporarily. And so this would have been a good time for Israel to play a more cautious, a more balanced game in Lebanon. And instead, it is doing the exact opposite. Now, I'm not saying anything in defense of certainly not Hezbollah, but also not of Lebanon's government. But we all knew that the Lebanese government is almost by definition and by, in the last few decades, been relatively weak. So Israel knew this in advance. I see, this is where I take issue with something that Joe said, that Israel is benefiting from this. Israel is not benefiting from this because it clearly has no end game. And the worst thing that could happen goes exactly to your premise, Imran, and that is, miscalculation and the pretense or the misleading notion that you actually control escalation, you control the level and the extent and the scale of escalation, as Mr. Netanyahu thinks he does. That's never, ever the case. And the next thing you know, Hezbollah is going to respond. And the next thing after that, Israel will say, well, if Hezbollah is firing rockets on Tel Aviv, how could we sit idly and we will bomb Lebanon, and Hezbollah will then retaliate. And before you know it, you have 2 or 3 armored divisions going from south to north in Lebanon.
Alan, let me put that point to Joe. Joe, one of the things that Alan just said, which I thought was very interesting, is that this idea that there isn't really a balanced approach right now by Israel to Lebanon. But I don't think there's ever been a balanced approach by Israel towards any of its neighbours, particularly Lebanon. Are you fearful that we could get into an escalation that the Americans then have to step in and then it just becomes the 1980s all over again?
I don't think we're going to go back to the 1980s. They don't have the Israelis. They don't need to have a end game because now they are trying to have they have unlimited U.S. support to basically strike whenever they want. They don't need the war, an expanded war. They already have a mini war going on since the ceasefire. They can target any point in Lebanon whenever they want. And the status quo now is benefiting both Hezbollah and the Israeli. The Americans now are not trying to deal with the problem. Once it gets bigger and explode, the Americans will intervene, try to find a way out. But now they are using the pressure of the Lebanese government to basically pressure Hezbollah economically, militarily, and financially. And obviously, this creates a problem in Lebanon because you have a target of a specific community and create an ambivalent country somehow. But when we try to argue that the Lebanese government should step aside because we are under unprecedented pressure, that's the Trump administration, and we have to have a daylight between Hezbollah and the government. We don't see it on the security aspect. I went to South Lebanon. We don't see the Lebanese army very present. And they need to fill this gap to try to basically balance the situation because we cannot put all the pressure on the government to act. There's the US-Iranian aspect. There's other nuanced approach. But we have an administration in Washington that's not aware or cautious of these things. So how to approach it, this is the big challenge. The Israelis are enjoying now the current status quo because they can do whatever they want. They don't need a war. But this doesn't benefit Lebanon on the short term or on the long term.
Well, sadly, gentlemen, we are out of time. I could have continued that discussion for a very long time, but I want to thank you all, Joe Macaron, Nadim, Houry and Alon Pinkas, and I want to thank you too for watching. You can see the programme again anytime by visiting our website, aljazeera.com. And for further discussion, go to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. And you can also join the conversation on X. Our handle is @AJ Inside Story. For me, Imran Khan, and the whole team here, bye for now.